So we begin this season of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. And immediately in Holy Mother Church, the scriptures that are given to us draw our attention right to the desert and how Jesus enters into the desert to deeply commune with the Father and overcome the temptations that the devil places in his midst. Now we hear in the second reading that Jesus is without sin. He is truly righteous in all of his ways. Why do you think Jesus would enter into the desert? If he's without sin, temptation has no power over him. Why would he do that? Well, the answer is, my brothers and sisters, that Jesus enters into the desert for you and for me, so that we may come to realize that we have the capacity to overcome temptation and sin with his assistance. Jesus assumes the lowliness of our humanity. He assumes human flesh in order to redeem it and to breathe a new life within it. In the first reading, we hear of Adam and Eve and how God breathed into the nostrils of Adam, from the earth. He formed Adam out of nothingness, out of the dust and the very dirt of the desert. He formed him out of clay and breathed into his nostrils the Ruach Elohim, a breath of life. And then entrusting Adam and Eve to the stewardship of all of creation, we know that they fell. Humanity's fallen state is due to the great fall of Adam and Eve. Now, what has catechesis or the sisters taught you from day one? What sin was it that Adam and Eve committed? Original sin, which was pride, right? Pride. Or St. Augustine explains this as avarice. Avarice sometimes is defined as like greedy. But beyond greed for money or power, it actually speaks to a greater existential hunger of taking hold of something that is not your own because of pride. It's more than hunger for money or power. It's even deeper than that. That's what avarice is. So avarice and pride, that is what is elemental to the very fundamental sin of our humanity. And each of us face it. Well, Jesus goes into the desert to overcome humanity's temptation. It's the same temptation that Adam and Eve faced. It's the same temptation that Jesus himself faced, and it's clearly the same temptation that each of us face. And it's threefold. First and foremost, Jesus in the desert is tempted by the devil, firstly, by appetite. Right? So Jesus is fasting, and he's appealed to in his appetite. Now we know in the scriptures it says that we can essentially make our belly our God. Do you remember that in the Bible? We can make our belly our God. But even further than that, the appetite of the senses are constantly calling out, feed me, feed me, feed me, Seymour, right? Constantly crying out, feed me. From our eyes, sight, smell, hearing, touch, our flesh is constantly crying out, feed me. Well, why would Jesus go out into the desert to starve the senses? Where there are no bouquets of flowers, where the people in the streets aren't banging the drums and the music and the tambourines, right? Where his flesh is not being ministered to with fine ointments and oils. essential oils, and lotions. He restricts that. He strips it all down, goes out into the desert, and the devil is right there, appealing first, what? To his flesh, his appetite. Huh? Is that different for you? Does the devil not appeal to your appetite? Does the devil not appeal to you and say, hey, if you eat this steak dinner at this fancy restaurant, you're going to be happy tonight? And then you go to that fancy restaurant, and the finely dressed waiter or waitress, are you allowed to call them anymore? Server. I want to be politically correct. I'm being recorded. Servers. They come out and they present you a plate, and it is overcooked. Ha! You have ruined my meal. Take it back. Undercooked. Oh, can our appetite and feeding our appetite really make us deeply fulfilled? Jesus knows very clearly that the inner hunger and the inner thirst of the soul is for God and God alone. And only God can quench that place within each one of us. This is why we have the season of Lent. This is why Jesus goes into the desert on our behalf and says, hey, come follow me into the desert and observe this ancient period of time of fasting for your senses, so that you can awaken that hunger and that thirst inside of you. First temptation. Second temptation. Presumption. The sin of presumption is where we presume something ordinary that is sacred. We take for granted the blessings that God gives us. Right? We do not account them as sacred. We don't account our responsibilities as sacred before God, our actions and the like. Let me give you a perfect example of presumption from the gospel. Jesus. The devil takes Jesus to the holy city, makes him stand on the parapet of the temple representing the mercy of God, and said to him, if you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and with their hands they will support you, lest you dash your foot against a stone. Now here is Jesus, the Son of God, perfectly us in our humanity without sin. The devil's saying, throw yourself off into the mercy of God. You're without sin. You didn't dash your foot against a stone. You're going to be fine. Presumption. Jesus says, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test. If Jesus is not going to put the Lord his God to the test, why do we constantly do that? The scripture says, and I say this all the time, you guys are going to hear it ad nauseum with me. For as long as I will be here, you will have this scripture memorized from James. The righteous man sins 7 times a day. And if you sit there and think you are righteous, you are prideful. And there you go. That's one thing you can confess. Okay? My brothers and sisters, each of us are sinful. The point is we need to examine our conscience and recognize where we are being sinful. And I assure you, if you look deeply into the appetites, if you look deeply into presumption, you will find sin. Every single one of us, yours included. Okay? I'm going to continue in the confessional. I hear it. Well, Father, I kind of fibbed a little bit. It's a white lie. And And, I did kind of say something about my neighbor, but it wasn't too bad. And, my husband drives me crazy, but it's like I deal with it. Been with him for like 40 years, Father. And I'm really not that bad of a person. Well, I'm not a sinner, really. My friends, sin is sin, period. Bold, underline, exclamation point. Sin is violation of God's law, and we are not perfect. We must recognize our imperfection before an all-righteous God. And we must be willing to follow him in the desert to be stripped down from our flesh and the actions of the flesh, from our presumption that, hey, I'll be good. I'm not that bad. Look how terrible that person is. We all do it. Each and every one of us. That's not how God judges. My brothers and sisters, we must utilize the structures of the church that Jesus Christ himself has established. And he has established his church based on the sacraments of reconciliation and Eucharist. Our worthy reception of Eucharist is not based on us being so holy. I'm so good, so I'm going to go up there and... No. We receive because we are made worthy. How are we made worthy? Through his grace, through his mercy. And how do we receive his grace and mercy? ¿Cómo? Only a couple of you know? I know because I don't have people in the confessional sometimes. Through confession. Oh, no, Father, no. I pray to my God. My God has mercy on me. That's it. I'm a good person. I'm not that bad. I talk to God. I'm all right. You have nothing to say. I'm relativistic. It's the philosophy I ascribe to. You have nothing to say to me. This is my relationship with God. The church doesn't have anything to say. The scriptures doesn't have anything to say. The Holy Father doesn't have anything to say. The apostles don't have to say. Deacon Dan doesn't have anything to say. And surely this loud priest who's going on and on, I've been standing here for 30 minutes already, he doesn't have anything to say. My brothers and sisters, we have to realize the church that Jesus Christ built. And in the upper room, after he rose from the tomb, he went to the apostles and he breathed on them. In the same sense of the breath of God, the Ruach Elohim, when God formed mankind, Adam, from the earth, breathing into the lungs of humanity, Jesus breathes on the apostles in similar fashion to give the apostles authority over every unclean spirit and to go out and to forgive sins. This is Jesus' ministry commissioned into the world by the priest. Important to realize. And we cannot presume it. And we're not going to presume that God's just going to have mercy on me because I pray at night. I pray my blessing over my meal. I go to Mass on Sunday. I pray my rosary. I'm a good Catholic. I practice natural family planning. I have 18 kids. We can't presume, We can't. That is so dangerous. And again, I'm going to conclude this section. I'm not concluding my homily. I'm going to conclude this section with, do not be presumptuous. Jesus Christ was not presumptuous to his God, nor of the traditions of Judaism. We are a continuation of the mother faith of Judaism. Let's not be presumptuous. And this is my plug. Thursday at 4:30, is our reconciliation penance service. We will have a number of priests here hearing confessions. Come to confession. If it's been 20, 30, 40, 50 years, come to confession. Rid yourself of the sin of presumption. Rid yourself of the sins of the flesh. And finally, Jesus in the desert overcomes the final battle of our human flesh. He overcomes the sin that is presented to him by the devil, where he takes him up and he shows him all of the kingdoms of the world, saying, you can have power over all of these places. What is the devil appealing to in the person of Jesus Christ? His what? His pride. His pride. His avarice. It's almost as if Jesus is the new Adam. He's appealed to at the very climax of our humanity's fallen state. He appeals to his pride, his ego, his self-assertiveness. And then Jesus says, get away, Satan, for it is written, the Lord your God shall you worship, and him alone shall you serve. Overcoming the threefold temptation of the evil one, the very next line is, then the devil left him, and behold, angels came and ministered to him. Do you wish to be free? Do you wish for the angels to come and minister to you? Do you pray for the breath of new life? Do you feel like you are in need of renewal? Do you feel like your life is messy and disturbed? This is the season for you. By prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, entering into the desert with Jesus, you will overcome and confess the sins of your flesh and your appetite. You will confess your presumption before an all-righteous God and his Son, Jesus Christ. And you will come to rightly worship the God who has written this salvation in a love letter written in his blood. May our worship be properly aright, and may our Lent be wholly observed.